So a few things to remember is that besides the prospects not really understanding the process and that putting you ultimately in a more authoritative state, the other thing to remember is that no matter how mean or how belittling these prospects become or are, or no matter how defensive they get, or no matter what words they tell you up front, at the end of the day, they have certain things that they use as a defense mechanism. So they might tell you that they're comparing you to other companies, but in reality, they're not. These are just things that they'll say. We even say it probably when we're buying a car, or when we're going out to buy something that's rather expensive, or when you're going to shop for something where you have multiple options and you can't necessarily go to Amazon, right? So you have to speak to someone. And we may go in saying like, hey, I'm comparing you to other places, because our motive is to get from the salesperson or from that company the best price or best offer, right? Because we're giving them the illusion that they may lose us if they don't give us the best price. And so that's why we'll say, oh, we're shopping and we're comparing. On the flip side, prospects can tell you that because they want to kind of reassert that they're not going to make a buying decision at the end of that conversation, meaning that they don't want to be pressured, they don't want to be asked to make a sale, and this module is going to teach you on how to overcome and how to deal with that type of prospect. But a key thing also is that no matter how mean they are, how aggressive they are, just remember they can't hurt you. So don't be afraid to be on the phone. Don't be afraid to take a call. Don't be afraid to start a sales conversation. Sales origination and sales intake, the intake calls, inbound leads, lead intake, all of that. This is the bare root of actually where a sale starts. So if you want to make more sales, you just got to take more leads. You have to initiate more sales conversations. But the illusion is that, when you think of a sales conversation, you think of the beginning of an actual sale. And usually the beginning of the sale or the sales conversation is where a lot of time is spent. So like, for example, if you sell a mortgage, that more than likely that initial sales conversation probably lasted 30 to 45 minutes. And that's just to take the app. Now, when you do the sales presentation and you actually do the sales pitch, that could be another 30 to 45 minutes. So just between them both, you got about an hour and a half. You got about 90 minutes of work before the actual process starts. And this can become daunting if you think that you have to do 90-minute conversations with all 7 or 6 leads you receive that day. So throughout these modules and throughout these courses, I'm going to share with you certain shortcuts, certain hacks that are going to help you save time and help you identify what power statements or power phrases you can use during the sales conversation that's going to influence urgency. It's going to give you control back of the conversation, and it's going to enable you to avoid wasting 45 or 90 minutes down a path with a prospect who never even deserved your time to begin with. And I'm gonna say it like that because I want you to look at it this way. I want you to look at it that your time is valuable. I want you to look at yourself as a subject matter expert. I want you to understand that you have the authoritative figure, because when you believe this, it exudes through your tone. It comes out through your body language, and it comes out through the way you speak. There's just confidence about it. And the faster you can put yourself within that position, I believe the faster that you'll become successful at the initial intake call, the initial conversation that creates the sale. So the conversation itself, because it is ultimately the root of every single sale, understand that this is a process that has to be repeated time and time and time again. You have to go through this process. Now, the key here is that as you go through it multiple times, it's something that you can refine. So as you begin your sales conversation for the first dozen times or for the first 50 times, you're going to notice that you may run across certain objections. These objections can be, okay, well, Daniel, I don't want to hear anything more. What's your bottom line fee? Or what's your bottom line rate? Or how much is your cost? I'm comparing you to 9 brokers who work for the home and charge half of the cost of the traditional retail outfit. So what's your cost? Before I waste any of my time. And this is how they're going to start the conversation. It's going to be very intimidating because you're like, there's that awkwardness. It's because we're in our own head. We're in our head because we are fearful of rejection. We're fearful of losing and wasting time. We're fearful of being criticized by our manager for not making that sale. We may even be fearful because we're being recorded, and we don't want that recording to be played in our sales training. And so there's a lot of these factors. There's a lot of these things that are saying, no, don't do it. But understand that it's you. It's all an illusion. And the faster that you get out of your own way, the faster you can fly. And so how do you get out of your own way though? How can I just start flying? Daniel, how the fuck can I get out of the way? And the answer to that is through repetition. You really just have to go through it. You have to step out of your comfort zone, really be acceptable to the fact that you're gonna get bumps and bruises along the way. You're gonna trip and fall. You're gonna get some scratches. And what I mean by that is you're not really gonna get hurt, right? What I mean by that is you're going to mess up, and it's okay. You gotta mess up. Most success is found through failure, because when you fail, when you scrape your knee, or when you make accidents, or when you make mistakes, you're realizing what not to do, and you would have never learned that if you didn't go through it, right? Very similar to the first time you learn how to walk, right? As a baby, this is a baby. You were a baby, right? And learning how to walk, there's certain things that you had to do, but no matter what, there's the chances of you falling and getting hurt was very high, because it was very different from the normal routine of crawling. And so the same concept applies to sales, is that you're just learning how to walk. And the real learning how to walk is just the initial sales conversation. The pitching, the selling, the persuasion, the influence, I'm going to share with you in the future modules. But in this module about intake, it's really just getting familiar with the concept of the sales conversation, and why most sales representatives fail at the sales conversation portion and never even make it to a sales pitch, let alone actually completing a sales transaction. So I want to take you down memory lane. When I first started in mortgage, I didn't even know what PITI meant. I had no idea what escrow was. As a matter of fact, I remember one of the very first applications that I ever did as a telemarketer for a mortgage company, they had a drop-down box, right? It says right next to payment, there's a drop-down box, and it gave 3 different options. First option was PI, which now I know is for principal and interest. The second option was PIT, which now I know is principal, interest, and taxes. And of course, the last option was PITI, principal, interest, tax, and insurance. I remember my first dozen applications as a new hire and as a telemarketer, being so naive and being so new, I used to ask the question of, is this payment PI, PIT, or PITI? I was reading it out loud. I had no idea it was abbreviation. The way my CRM was set up, it didn't tell you too many examples, right? It just put a box where you could put the payment in, and then there's a drop-down box of PI, PIT, or PITI. I had no idea those were acronyms. I had no idea that those were the initials of what it stood for. So I was reading it out loud, and prospects, they were correcting me. They were like, what? PI, PIT, or PITI? I don't know what that means. They would tell me this, and I'd move on to the next question. It took me so long to learn that actually was principal, interest tax, and principal, interest, tax, and insurance. And it took me it took me to build the courage to ask for that answer. And sometimes when we are shameful to ask for help, we'll have to learn the hard way. And so I want to let you know right now that you have resources around you. Probably the easiest resource that you have around you is probably someone who sits right next to you on your sales floor. Now, the resources are going to grow, meaning you're going to have other resources like how to properly sell and stay consistent within your specific process, because every company has their own specific process when it goes from sales conversation to pitch, sell, and then you start the process. Unlike other salesmen, our process lasts between 30 to 45 days, depending on the speed of your company. Sometimes it could last 60 to 90 days, depending on the complexity of that transaction. And so during this entire process, multiple things can happen. But if you pay attention to the content within these modules, you're going to figure out that there is a system and a way of doing it where it's just on autopilot. So you don't need to babysit and check in every single day of the 60 to 90 day process. Much like you don't need to do a 90-minute conversation with everyone you talk to. As a matter of fact, a lot of the conversations you're going to have are probably only going to last like 5 to 7 minutes. The ones that make it past that are those that earned your time, are those that were actually qualified to do the application. And that's one of the misconceptions I discussed earlier, is that when sales representatives think of sales origination, they think of that 90-minute process. So they think like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do this all over again. What if I do the 90-minute process and then they say no? Or what if I put 90 minutes in and they decline me because my prices are too high, or they decline me because my rate is too high? And I have a secret for you, is that as long as you can figure out what the prospect's emotional tie is to the outcome of our service. So we lower rates, or we give cash out, or we give means to a lower payment. There is an emotional tie to that outcome. And as long as we can find that and properly communicate our message and our solution to this prospect, they won't care about the rate. They won't care about the fee. I've sold many prospects on interest rates and fees that were far higher than my competitors. And I'm not saying that to say, hey, I take advantage of our prospects. You can't do that these days. But I came from a time of originating sales where you were able to profit off of points. You were able to make more money through higher interest rates. And coming up in this industry, I worked for one of the largest subprime lenders in the world. And all they did was really teach their sales representatives on how to leverage benefit. And that benefit was a payment deferral, cash in hand, debt consolidation, and tax benefits. That was mainly the benefits that we educated our prospects on. And there's a reason for that, is because when we became the subject matter experts, when we had the ability to educate versus sell, or consult versus sell, we gave ourselves the opportunity to earn the sale by way of really earning it, not because we had the lowest rate or because we had the lowest fees. Most of our programs that we were selling at the time was a 2-year fix with a 3-year prepayment penalty, meaning they were accepting the fact that they would have to pay 6 months of interest, depending on the loan size. This is upwards of about $10,000 to $12,000 in a penalty if they refinanced before that 3 years. Here's the thing, is that 99% of them refinanced within 3 years, so they were okay with paying that. But why? Is because we were able to exploit the emotional tie that the prospect had to the outcome that we deliver. Whether the outcome was through lower payment, whether the outcome was through cash in hand so they could pay off other credit card debt and thus lower their overall payment, or whether it's because we gave them cash out so they can get the kitchen that Mrs. Jones has been wanting since they moved in, and that emotional tie was to keep Mrs. Jones happy, or they wanted that new bathroom set or bathroom remodeling because we never knew Mr. Jones loves an Epsom salt bath because he was a war veteran and his joints are bad from serving in the military, right? These are the emotional ties. This is the actual why as to why they're buying. They're not buying because of the lower rate or lower fee. Although they will tell you that up front, again, it's their way of putting in a defense mechanism. It's similar to the reason why they're going to tell you, oh, I'm shopping, I'm comparing you to 900 different companies. Whoever's got the lowest rate is going to earn my business. Sure, let them tell you that. But what they're really doing is kind of just putting up this guard, right? So this module is going to share you how to destruct and deconstruct that guard and break past that guard. And so what I have is a sales script for you. It's downloadable, so if you haven't printed it out already, at least open it up so you can see that the sales script is not really that complex. It's very simple, but you're going to notice that within the sentences, I'm addressing the main concerns that all prospects have when entering into a sales conversation. Their main concern of being able to speak to the right person, right? So the line where it says, I'm authorized to provide you the information you need, I'm addressing that concern. Also, provide the information they need, I'm already addressing the concern of them wanting to answer questions or wanting answers for the questions, right? But right in the very beginning of that sales script, you'll notice that I say, I don't want to waste any of your time, so I'm just going to make sure you're in the right place. That teeters on the emotion of them wasting time. These are the common concerns or objections that we meet right at the very beginning of the sales conversation. If you think about it, right? The sales conversation will always start with, oh, I don't have time. Or, oh, what's your rate and what's your fee? Basically what they mean is like, do you have benefit for me, right? Or I don't want to waste any time because I don't want to go through this process. Again, they have their own illusion, so let them have their own illusion. And so when speaking to a prospect, you also want to pay attention to certain sounds, not just the sound of their voice, although hearing the sound of their tone will help you discover a lot of things, whether the prospect is being defensive, whether the prospect is nervous, whether the prospect is aggressive. The tone of their voice will tell you a lot about that person, and I'll dive deeper in that in the modules to come. But what you really want to listen to is their atmosphere. What kind of environment are they in? Are you talking to them while they're in the car and the kids are yelling in the back? Are you on Bluetooth in the speaker and maybe their attention isn't fully there? Are you talking to them while they're running errands at the grocery store? Are you talking to them while they're at their desk on a 5-minute lunch break and you're about to do a 45-minute phone call with them? You have to be aware and coherent to the things that are happening within their atmosphere, because in the sales conversation, it's important that you really do have their attention, because you're going to ask specific questions that they really need to know the answers to. And without having the right answers, you're not necessarily going to know how to prepare the pitch. And the pitch, of course, is what actually combines the sales conversation to the sale. So when you're listening to certain things within their background, you want to be coherent to if they are busy. And what I mean by that is if you talk to someone, let's just say they are on a 5-minute lunch break, it doesn't mean to say, oh, well, I'll go ahead and call you back, because you may never connect with that person again. It's very important that you understand a few things so you can ensure that they'll take your call the next time.